Alrighty guys, hello and welcome back to the show. Today, I figured I might as well just try and make everybody angry. We're going to be ranking the factions in Forge Alliance Forever. I've been in a little bit of a creative rut lately, and I figured, might as well just make everybody angry while I'm in this creative rut. So we're going to be ranking them via which factions are workable in the most maps, in the most play styles, and at the highest variety of skill levels. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, for anybody that has watched my channel for any period of time, knows that I am not a fan of the Aeon faction at all, except for playing air. I like playing Aeon in the air slot, but for ladder matches or on the front line, I'm not going to touch Aeon with a 9-foot pole or a 10-foot pole or however long of a pole you actually have. You've just got to micro your armies so much, and then it's 20 minutes into the game, and you realize that not only are you still T1 on your main land factory, but you also never took any of your core mass. And not only that, but none of your mass extractors are upgraded because you've been spending all of your time making sure that your armies aren't dying because one mantis can take on like 30 aurora if it gets into range. Okay, that was good to get out. So, all right, let's just breathe. So, Aeon are viable on certain maps, in certain situations, and in the hands of certain players. But that's why I'm ranking them in this particular slot, which is, in the 4th slot. They're fundamentally different from the other factions just in the way that they're played. They're much more of a, if you're thinking about cutting tools, they're much more of a scalpel than a machete. Whenever a mobster in a tracksuit with a chainsaw breaks down your door, you really want a scalpel in your hands? Probably not. But on the flip side, you can definitely conduct surgery with a machete. Probably. Okay, yeah, this analogy's falling apart. Yeah, you probably can't. But anyway, that's kind of the analogy that I'm using. So the Aeon is a very targeted tool. Like they're very good in the hands of certain players in certain situations and on certain maps. And outside of that, they really, really struggle. So the trade-offs with the factions are just really, really too great if you don't play it well. Like there's very little forgiveness, I think, with the Aeon faction as a whole, even outside of T1 land, which is what a lot of people zero in on. They do have a fantastic T1 battle unit, but if you look away for 2 seconds, your army gets eviscerated. So that's always fun to deal with. The T2 heavy tank has insanely high DPS and great durability, but it takes power. So if you don't play in your power grid very well, then the remaining armor after the shield falls down heavily resembles paper mache. The Navy has almost no cross compatibility. Destroyers have no AA, battleships have no AA, frigates have no AA, and you have to build other units to have any naval based AA, not just good anti-aircraft, like literally any anti-aircraft, which really bugs me about this faction, and it leaves them vulnerable in the Navy. The air and the experimentals do redeem them here. Like the Restorer is a really, really good gunship at both dealing with land and air-based threats. And their experimentals are great, like the Galactic Colossus and the Tsar, as well as like the Salvation and other units are really, really powerful units. I just don't really think that this is enough to bring them back, because you can't play only air on the front line. Like if you're on one of those forward slots on like Wonder or one of these other maps where you're not in a dedicated air slot, you can't just say, all right, screw it, to hell with land, I'm gonna go straight air, and that's not gonna work out for you. In the hands of a talented player on the right map, the Aeon can kick some serious butt, but those conditions don't always occur. And so the way that I'm ranking these factions just is going to put the Aeon faction in last. So if you're an Aeon fanboy, Willow, sorry for hurting your feelings. Okay, so in 3rd place, we have the UEF. So the UEF are a hard-punching, knuckled-up brawler of a faction sporting higher HP for most of its units than its counterparts, an uncrackable turtle, and but the lack of gimmicks really makes it a great choice for newer players. By lack of gimmicks, I mean like mobile stealth and things like that, or toggleable stealth. Like think of any Cyberin unit. This makes it a great choice for newer players. And I've got a lot of love for the UEF, but there's one main thing that puts them third on this list. And I think that it's mostly because the UEF is really, really good at not losing games, but don't have as many tools as the other factions to actually win the games. And this is reflected in the units that are available to the faction. So the UEF has a tier 3 point defense, which means that you are semi-incentivized to turtle or PD creep, neither of which are great ways to actually win the game. The Fat Boy is a powerful unit, but it's one that you really have to pay attention to. And it's kind of hard to go on the offensive with the Fat Boy unless you have a lot of support with it, because it's pretty vulnerable to air and as well as other experimentals. Like even though the Fat Boy, like if you match a Fat Boy and a Galactic Colossus up against each other and the Fat Boy is retreating, the Fat Boy will kill the Galactic Colossus before it gets into range. But it's something where just the appearance of another experimental immediately forces the Fat Boy to retreat. So that makes it a little bit harder to go hard offensive with a Fat Boy. And as well, like it's very difficult to go offensive against another Fat Boy. Like the Fat Boy counters itself. Like the best counter to a Fat Boy is another Fat Boy or two Fat Boys. Lots of Fat Boys. Most of the other units are really good, but not fantastic with the exception of the Percival. So like the Striker is good, the Pillar is tanky, has a really, really great HP per mass ratio. The Wasp is pretty solid, the Broadsword's great, the Summit's great. But none of these units really blow you away with their potential. Like they're great units and all, and none of them are particularly bad, but they don't really have like a huge wow factor to really push it over the top for you. And so a lot of the unique aspects of the UEF are geared more towards turtle or more standoff tactics with tier 3 PD, the Fat Boy, etc. A lot of the unique tools that the UEF have available are fit more into kind of that realm. That being said, the UEF is a faction kind of the opposite of the Aeon faction. It's a good faction, but there aren't a huge amount of things that like a god tier player, like think of Jagged Appliance or Nexus or Tagada. There are not a lot of tools that a really, really good player can take advantage of here. So it's a good faction in any player's hands, but it's not a great faction in a great player's hands, so to speak. Like, yeah, Tagada could pick up the UEF faction and absolutely take me to school any day of the week. But I think that there are fewer exploitable tactics within the UEF faction than there are in our top two factions that we're going to look at. So think of it as a chef's knife. Offers a wide variety of utility to multiple people. So before we get into the top two factions, I wanted to talk about the criteria for ranking these, and these were difficult to score. I'm looking primarily at versatility on different maps, tools available to be used, and what tools you have at your disposal if your primary focus, and meaning Navy, land, or air, goes south and you have to use a different one to compensate. So that being said, in second place, I'm actually putting Cyberin. The Cyberin faction, it does offer a lot of unique tools that higher players can use, all their stealth, while maintaining a good set of units that lower level players can still use effectively. So the Mantis, the Rhino, the Brick, all of these are good units that can be used even if you're not abusing the fact that they have deceivers or mermaids or things like that. And so getting into some of the units that kind of propel it into this slot, the stealth is just so freaking good. I talked about this a little bit in one of the custom games that I posted a while back, but deceivers and mermaids are just so strong. Like you can stealth your hoplites and whittle away in an army and either force your opponent to engage or retreat if they're going to, save their army. And even if your opponent picks engage, you still have Rhino. Or your rhinos, ideally, you have rhinos in your mix, which is still like a damn good main battle tank. So it's a great way to kind of put your opponent into a rock and a hard place, pairing deceivers, hoplites, as well as rhinos, and mixing them all into your army. It also has a very wide range of experimental tools, ranging from the cheapest to also the most expensive that are appropriate in different situations. So you got the Monkey Lord, you got the Megalith. Monkey Lord being much cheaper, a little bit more stealthy. The Megalith being, kind of I think it has the highest HP of any experimental in the game, if I'm remembering that correctly. So it offers a wider range of experimental tools that are available to you. It also has an air experimental and an experimental artillery as well. The air units also sport stealth technology, which gives your air units at T3 a leg up in overall air battles. So the Gemini and the Revenant, both having stealth technology, allows for both sneaky strat runs or strat snipes, and can help mask where your air force is. So if you're trying to get a good turn or ambush your opponent's air force, this is a great tool to use, is the stealth. Navy is pretty solid. They do have like god tier frigates, and they don't really run into any issues until T3, but even at T3, like the Galaxy isn't a huge slouch as far as battleships go. But really the Cyberin shines at T1 and T2 from a Navy perspective. The only real drawback here is the commander. The comm is really only good in early game or late game, and there's a little bit of a lag in power, so to speak, in the mid game. If you think of this as like I'm kind of a car guy, so if you think of this as like an engine, engines have different power spikes depending on the rotations per minute that the engine is actually putting out. So the Cyberin commander has a power spike early up until it gets like, to 2,000-3,000 RPM. And then it lags out up until 5,000 RPM, and then it pulls hard up through the red line. So that's kind of how the Cyberin commander works. And the reason this is you really have to choose between T2 or gun. And then you don't have any kind of auxiliary upgrades like nano repair, restoration field, shield generator, things like that to kind of augment your comm in the mid game. The reason why it does have a huge power spike later is because of the telemaser, which I believe is a super powerful tool. I've used it in ladder matches in the past, but that's kind of the dead zone of the Cyberin commander is, once the gun kind of loses its luster by itself, your comm really just has to kind of hang back until you either decide to telemaser or you win the game in a different way. So talked about how the Cyberin offers good tools for a variety of different players that will always do the job for the situation. So think of them as some kind of knife that's good for a lot of things. This analogy is getting away from me. But really what I'm trying to say is a lower level player or somebody who's a little bit newer to the game can take the Cyberin and do well with them, because the Mantis is a good battle unit, the Rhino's a good unit, Salem's a good unit, etc. All kind of standalone without any of the gimmicks. And then a really good player can take those same units, mix in Deceivers, mix in Mermaids, Monkey Lords, etc., and really utilize the faction to its fullest potential. So I think that it does offer a very wide range of versatility across the skill levels. I don't think it offers as much versatility as our first ranked faction, though, in overall map types. So let's get into our first place. So naturally, this means that the Seraphim gets first place here. Sarah is, I think, a highly versatile faction that is really solid in any position and has a lot of forgiveness for newer players, with a lot of tools that can be utilized for higher level players, like we talked about just now. So whenever we talk about this in terms of units, we have a fantastic T2 main battle unit. It has good health, good range, good damage. It's incredibly powerful. I've literally seen Ilshivas save a player from losing the game. And I've actually cast that game. If you guys want to go watch it, it was one of my very early casts, but I'll drop a link in the description down below if you guys want to go see it. The Thams are pretty solid and can trade blows with other T1 main battle units, but the real star of the show here for T1 land is going to be the Zui. This sports the highest damage of any T1 artillery unit, and it can also float, which means that if you're playing, say, Setons, and let's say you're in the North Pond on the beach, and your opponent is just absolutely taking it to you, and you've lost Navy, and you need to stall so that your ally in the Southern Pond can finish taking it to their beach player, the best tool at your disposal here is going to be drop 10 to 15 land factories and just throw as many Zuis into the ocean as you can. And that's not going to win you Navy, but it's going to slow them down, and it's going to maintain your base so that you can buy some time for your team, which is, I believe, huge amount of versatility in a T1 unit. In the Navy, they have arguably the second best frigates, and I can't remember the frigate name. I'm not going to try and pronounce it. They have destroyers that can submerge, and they have really, really powerful T3 sub hunters. Even though their battleship is a little bit lackluster, sub hunters more than make up for it. And like I said, destroyers that can submerge, cruisers are pretty solid as well. They have a good, well-rounded naval game through all the various tiers. Air is, I think, the only area where they don't shine super hard, but they don't slouch at all by any means. The Voltu is a very solid gunship. I actually sniped Rowan with them in a game that I played last night. The ASF also isn't terrible, but it doesn't really bring anything super special to the table. The experimentals offer really good flexibility with both the Awasa and the Athoda, allowing for multiple areas where you can attack. And the Calm is another area where the Seraphim really shine with the Restoration Field, Advanced Nano Repair, as well as other upgrades that they can get outside of just the or Tactical Missile Launcher, and other upgrades that they can get outside of just gun speed and range, as well as construction upgrades. So I think that the Calm is another good area there. You can check out my videos where I do deep dives into the various commanders and break down all the various stats, etc. I have those on my channel as well. If you want to go see, I have one for each of the 4 factions. But that'll explain a little bit more why I think the Seraphim commander is so strong. So going with our knife theme, these guys are the machete. Definitely able to cut down a mobster breaking through your door with the chainsaw, and probably able to perform surgery. Maybe. We'll see. Let's wrap the video there, guys. Do you agree with my ranking? Do you disagree? Discuss in the comments down below. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.